Welcome back. Now for what's trending in true crime. Boulder Police say that they're still optimistic that they're going to solve the murder of JonBenét Ramsey. The little girl was found dead in the basement of her family's Colorado home on Christmas night back in 1996, and the case still gets national attention. Her parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, and even her then 9-year-old brother Burke, were all investigated, but none of them were ever charged. Patsy Ramsey has since passed away, but Boulder's chief of police says they're still in touch with JonBenét's father.
Our department has had ongoing conversations with JonBenét's family, the last of which occurred in mid-2024, and we are committed to continued open dialogue.
Now, today, if she were alive, JonBenét Ramsey would be 34 years old. So this morning, we're asking our power panel, why would Boulder Police be so optimistic? Still with me, as you can see in the studio, Attorney Noah Pines, remotely Attorney Melba Pearson, and also want to welcome into the conversation forensic death investigator, professor, and the host of the Body Bags podcast, Joseph Scott Morgan. Professor Joe, I want to begin with you, please. This is a case you've followed since its inception. What do you think police could be so optimistic about now?
I think everything, all of the answers rest in the DNA. That's what I truly believe in my heart of hearts, because so much has been made of all these other findings over the years that they had at the crime scene. But what it's going to come down to is that molecular signature that has been left behind. And I think that a lot of this is going to be literally at the hand of JonBenét, because just based on the nail clippings alone, where they found this non-connected DNA source material that's not connected to anybody in the Ramsey family, and they had to exclude them based upon that. Not to mention some of the other peripheral items there that I feel as though that could be sourced for the technology that we have today that we didn't have back then, Julie. We are light years away from where we were back in the mid-90s relative to the examination of DNA evidence.
I appreciate that, Professor Joe. I know you're going to remember this next clip I'm going to play, a conversation we had at CrimeCon with John Ramsey, JonBenét's dad. Let's take a look.
John Douglas said this was someone who was very angry at you or very jealous of you. And I said, well, I couldn't have made anybody angry like that. He said, you may not even know him. You know, we were a small, big, fairly large company in a small town. We were in the newspaper. And so that's John's theory. Lou said, well, this is a kidnapping gone wrong. And I thought, well, those two conflict.
Right.
But somebody pointed out, no, they really don't. They don't necessarily need to conflict. They could be the same issues, and I thought, yeah, you're right. They don't conflict.
And I know you remember that answer very well, Professor Joe. Even though we couldn't see you in that clip, you were sitting right there.
I was there.
And there were wide shots that showed you and Commander Mike King, another one of our wonderful regular analysts as well. It was a great conversation, really robust, and that answer we saw was in response to the question of what do you think happened to your daughter. But back to the optimism of the police. Noah Pines, let me go to you next, please. What do you think they could be so optimistic about?
Well, I think Professor Joe's probably correct. The only thing they could really have, unless they have new leads, would be DNA. The question, I guess, Professor Joe, is what DNA is left to test? You know, did they use it all up? I mean, I know things have changed. We've used DNA at the Innocence Project with cases I worked on to exonerate people, but a lot of times there's no DNA left to test. And, you know, that would be obviously an issue. But it's a weird statement to be like, oh, we're going to figure this out in 2025. So either they're just kind of saying that to keep it out there, or they really do have something, you know, in the lab.
Right. And Noah, you read my mind with that. And I'll direct this question to Melba, please. I thought the same thing. Like, do they like somebody for this right now? Because to put a time frame, an expiration date on it, so to speak, when they're going to have a charging in this case, it felt a little bit like maybe they're 3 steps ahead of what they want the public to know. Melba, your thoughts on that, please?
Absolutely, Julie. I think that it's very dangerous to put a time frame on something like that unless you actually have evidence and you're ready or close to being ready to move forward. Because, of course, if you say, oh, yes, this will be solved in 2025, and then we get to January 2026 and there's no resolution, that's bad from a public relations perspective, as well as, from a confidence perspective in terms of the family, in terms of the community. So what I'm actually starting to think, and, both Noah and Joe touched on this, is the DNA and the scientific aspect, but even looking more in terms of genealogy, because maybe they could be doing sort of that reverse genealogy that we saw with the Golden State Killer case in Sacramento that got resolved as a result of, sort of that 23andMe going backwards and realizing that a biological family member has a similar DNA to something found at the scene, and then you're able to trace from there and realize it was the uncle or the cousin of, somebody completely different, but just as a result of that genealogy, you can now backtrack and figure out who did it. So maybe that's what they have going on, and they've heard some positive news, and that's why they feel that they could break it next year. But I'm definitely very curious to see why and how they're going to be able to put this case together, especially with how cold it is at this juncture.
Right. Really great thoughts, Melba. Thank you. So 28 years since little JonBenét was killed when she was 6 years old. Police are saying that they're very aware that they know the public is interested in this case, hasn't lost interest, and they want answers. Take a look.
I know that our community would like to know more information and specifics on our progress, but like any major criminal investigation, there is no way that we can share that information publicly without compromising the integrity of this case and any future prosecution by the district attorney's office.
All right, so we hear a lot of criticism, people saying there were so many failures with this investigation. And so let's talk about that. What are the biggest failures in this case? Let's name them. What do we think went wrong? Professor Joseph Scott Morgan, I want to go back to you, please.
Failure to secure the scene. That rings in my ears over these many years. And it's something that I actually use these circumstances as a teaching tool at Jack State, and I talk about how this is a monumental failure. I think probably, within it, as we say, inside the tape, the failure to thoroughly search that house. Look, if you're looking for something that belongs in a structure and it is missing, even though there was this implication of a kidnapping, you're going to start at ground zero and thoroughly search this place. I don't want to hear stories about locked doors. I don't want to hear stories about, well, it was just too big or we were undermanned. And you've got a police representative there allegedly telling the father and his friend, well, why don't you guys just search on your own? That is one of the biggest violations of a crime scene search. And mind you, this is a crime scene, even if it is a kidnapping. You're going to have the dad and his friend go search the house. Their fallback position has always been, well, we're a small, undermanned department. We don't have experience with homicides, this sort of thing. This is very elemental stuff here. When you get down in the granular level of this is basic crime scene processing 101. And they failed monumentally. And it was at that moment in time that this took a serious turn. I'm so glad at this point that they have new eyes on this case with a new administration that are going to put aside pride, hopefully, finally, after all these years, and move forward to the answers that JonBenét deserves.
Yes. Professor Joe, the next time you lecture on this case at Jack State University, please invite me. I want to listen to your lecture. I've loved this insight you've been sharing this morning, and we'll leave it here for now, but this is a case we'll continue talking about for the weeks to come. Professor Joseph Scott Morgan, got to say goodbye and a big thank you to you. We'll see you again very soon. And check out his podcast, Body Bags. It is excellent.